Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We're glad you're here for today's webinar, Everyday AI, Smart Tools for Work and Life. I'm Greg Berry, Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. A disclaimer, as with any virtual event, occasional technical hiccups may occur. If you experience any video or audio issues, simply click Reconnect or refresh your screen to return to the presentation quickly. We're going to kick things off by getting an idea of what our audience is all about. What's your current relationship with AI? You work together every day. You're getting to know each other. You've heard a lot about it, but you haven't jumped in, or it's just complicated. Go ahead and make your selection. We're going to take a look at these results in just a few moments. Just a heads up, we are recording today's webinar. Our live audience will get an email with the link once it's ready. Joining us today is Christopher Hickman, an instructor at the UAB School of Nursing and founder of Blueline Insights. He teaches and speaks nationally on practical AI applications in education and healthcare with a focus on responsible tools that save time and support meaningful work. Today's webinar is the first of a three-part AI series. Join us again on August 13th for Good, Risky, or Unknown, the ethics of everyday AI. During this session, we're going to explore the ethical questions behind AI's rapid growth. Then later on August 27th, we're going to host Behind the Screens, What AI-Powered Care Means for Patients, for a look at how AI is transforming healthcare and the patient experience. You can register for these at alumni.uab.edu/events. Before turning things over, we're going to take a look at the results of the earlier poll. Let me go ahead and we'll take a look. So 57%, Chris says, we're getting to know each other. 22%, so about a quarter of our audience hasn't jumped in yet. So that's fantastic. And thanks for sharing all that insight. As we transition into today's presentation, another quick question. How often do you currently use AI tools in your work or personal life? You're doing it daily or almost daily, weekly, monthly. You've experimented with it. Not yet. You're just curious, or not yet because you're skeptical. We're going to go ahead and keep that poll up for a bit so you can submit the answer that best matches your motivation. And we're going to drop those in the chat here in a little bit. At this time, Chris, welcome. I'm looking forward to today's presentation.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak today. And I appreciate the insights that we're getting on these polls. I'm watching as they come through. And I think what I'm going to talk about today fits the audience where they are. You're not necessarily avoiding AI. You're not 100% on board with it yet, although some of you seem to be, but you're somewhere in the middle. And a lot of times whenever I'm trying to figure out what is the latest out there, what can I possibly do with it, I like to hear about others' experiences with it, whether it's people that I work with face-to-face or whether it's folks that I read about, whether that's in blogs or books or newsletters or whatever. I like to find out how folks are using it. So I consume a lot. And I want to talk to you about that today. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about AI, teaching it, testing the tools that are out there, and most importantly, helping people decide where it fits in their work. So today, I don't want to talk to you I don't want to bring you into a technical lecture. I'm not trying to turn you into a machine learning or an AI expert today. I'm not going to ask you to be a programmer or memorize model names or reorganize your life around the newest product releases, because as everybody knows, this is a very fast moving topic. So today, I just want to talk to you about the more ordinary moments where artificial intelligence can be useful. You may be tired of hearing about AI. You may be hopefully not just hearing about it, but maybe just getting your toes wet with it. But think about things like the blank email that you keep avoiding, or the 20-page document that you need to understand before a meeting in 5 minutes, or the notes that you wrote but you can't find. Or think about this, the trip that you're trying to plan with 6 different constraints attached. These are really small points of friction, but they tend to accumulate. So my basic argument today is going to be pretty simple, that artificial intelligence is most valuable whenever it reduces the friction and gives us more room for our judgment and our creativity and our relationships. And really the work that actually requires a person. So I'm going to show you how I think about it, how you could possibly think about it, several ways that you could use it, and safer ways to begin if you've barely even touched it. So if you already use AI every day, and it looks like some of us do, I hope that you leave with a cleaner framework about using it more deliberately. So, Greg, do we want to touch on this poll here? Or should I just continue?
Yeah, we can go ahead and touch on this poll, and I've got a few others that I'll launch throughout the webinar that we don't have to really focus on. We'll just do that kind of behind the scenes. But this is fantastic information of kind of laying the scope for what's to come with the discussion, Chris. And it's interesting. I think most people do use AI on a daily basis. I mean, almost half of our audience, with 21% admitting weekly. I'm very, very surprised that 14% or even 28% have just kind of touched the surface of it so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is if you combine the results here with the previous poll, we have folks that are using it, but not overly experienced with it. But we have almost a majority of folks here at 47% that use it daily or almost daily. So that means that people are getting started with it and they're getting more comfortable with it and it's becoming part of their lives, but they don't know what the bigger advances are in it. How could they possibly integrate it more in the work that they do or in their personal lives?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's where we'll go. So thank you for that insight. Let's see, with this system. All right. So here's slide number 2. So most of us, we're not sitting around waiting for a machine to think for us. We're just trying to get through our day with the limited amount of time and attention that we've got. So we know how to write an email, but starting an email, it can take 15 minutes in some cases. You're thinking about what it is you want to write. We understand our field, but turning 6 pages of notes into a clear plan is harder than it should be. We can research a topic pretty easily, but getting oriented may require opening 15 browser tabs on your desktop. So that's what I mean by friction. It's the distance between knowing what needs to happen and getting the first useful version of what you need in front of you. So AI can be the shortener of that distance. It can help you begin. It can help you organize and question and revise what you're working on. But the key here is that it doesn't remove your responsibility. You still decide what matters. You still decide what's true and what sounds like you and what should happen next. AI can't take that away from you, nor should it. And so the framing also helps with AI fatigue. You don't need to use AI absolutely everywhere that you are or where you work. Look for one task where the friction is real and the risk is still manageable. So if the tool doesn't make that task meaningfully easier or better, there really is no prize in using AI for that task. So let me advance the slide here. Throw you a little metric here. The World Economic Forum surveyed more than 1,000 employees for its 2025 Future of Jobs report. And then 86% said that they expect AI and information processing technologies, not specifically AI, to transform their business by the year 2030. Now, that's not too far away. That doesn't mean that 86% of the jobs disappear. It means that the tools and workflows and expectations around a lot of these jobs are changing. So there's 2 unhelpful reactions to that. One is panic. You're panicking that the machines are coming for everything. The other unhelpful reaction is dismissal. And this is, in other words, this is just another fad that's going to settle down. But the evidence here supports a more balanced position. Some tasks will be automated. Some roles will change. There will be new work that will appear. And organizations will need they'll need people who can use these systems with judgment, with their human judgment. So that's what AI literacy means to me. It's not the mastery of every platform, but it's knowing what the technology can do, recognizing where the technology can fail, and asking for useful input, or you're asking for useful output, and then checking that output and knowing when to use it and when not to use it. So think about the advantage this gives you in workplaces that are constantly changing. You can participate in the conversation. You can evaluate a proposed use case. You can ask better questions without, even if you're not the technical expert with these technologies. So the AI literacy, or literacy in general, gives you agency. It allows you to shape how technology enters your work rather than just adopting it after someone else has made the choices. So if you've learned to search the web well, and since the late 90s when Google hit the scene, we all know how to search well. If you know how to interpret spreadsheets or communicate effectively by email, then you've developed a form of professional literacy. AI is moving in that same category. The goal here is not to chase every update, because updates are coming fast. We hear about updates every day in the news and in anything that you might be reading. The goal here is to become competent enough that you can make your own decisions instead of having those decisions made for you through fear and hype and somebody else's sales pitch. So staying literate does require some way to keep up, because topics, as we've established, are evolving quickly. And I use a small, what I consider a really small information diet, instead of trying to follow every announcement that's made. So a couple of my main sources that I use are a couple of newsletters. 1440 is one, and then Superhuman, the Superhuman newsletter, is another one. 1440 gives me a broad view of what's happening beyond AI, whereas Superhuman focuses specifically on AI development and tools and practical uses. 1440 tends to be a less biased type of newsletter and just gives you the straight facts. So I also read other newsletters like The Code, and it covers about the same ground as Superhuman, but sometimes it brings a different perspective. And that perspective is what I need in my work. And the difference is valuable because I don't want one newsletter to decide which developments matter or what I should know, but I want to know and determine how I can interpret them with different points of view. So newsletters certainly help me scan. LinkedIn helps me see what practitioners are discussing and how developments are affecting real work. Of course, there's a lot of talk about slop, just AI-generated content that's not reviewed by humans, that seems to be overtaking LinkedIn and other forms of social media. So you certainly have to have your critical thinking about you whenever you go through those avenues. So when something deserves a deeper investigation, I tend to use ChatGPT's deep research to explore a topic. And then I've recently gotten more into Coursera to learn more about different topics. Like recently, I've been more into linear algebra because I'm about to go into a doctorate program in AI and machine learning. And I haven't had linear algebra since a summer semester back when I was a sophomore in undergrad. So I'm getting more into that now. And that's where Coursera certainly helps me. So that combination of tools helps me stay on top. And of course, none of these sources get the final word, because when a claim matters, I tend to follow that back to the primary source and then compare accounts and distinguish how a product announcement and someone's opinion about that and independent evidence all come together to form a holistic view of a topic. So a useful information routine should help you recognize when something deserves a closer look, but it should not give you something that's just more material to consume, because we're already busy enough. But you'll determine what it is that's best for you to stay on top of the topics that matter to you based on how you listen to others. So let's talk a little bit more about more of a realistic mental model of how we can consider AI. So generative AI is remarkably fluent. You can ask it a question and you can get an answer that sounds confident and organized and hopefully complete. But that fluency is useful, but it can fool us. Don't forget that AI is not infallible. A helpful mental model that you can use in using a very fast pattern making, using AI as a fast pattern making collaborator is what I wanted to say. It can draft, it can summarize, it can classify, it can compare, explain, generate alternatives, rewrite it in other ways that make sense to you or to others with different reading levels. It can take rough thoughts and turn them into structure. It can also misunderstand an assignment. It can invent a citation. It can miss context. It can give you yesterday's answer to today's questions. So the NIST tends to call this confabulation or risk confabulation. A lot of us know it as hallucinations, and hallucinations are important to know. It's an important point that a polished answer from AI is not the same thing as a verified answer. Hallucinations are not limited to obscure facts. And artificial intelligence can invent a study. It can produce a realistic looking citation that just doesn't exist. It can misquote somebody. It can invent people. It can combine two events together or supply the wrong number with complete confidence. So asking for an AI for a source can certainly help, but you still need to open that source and confirm that the claim that it's correct in its claims. So we also need to talk about bias in data, because bias is different than hallucinations, but it's related. So artificial intelligence learns patterns from human created materials, and that material contains unequal representation. It can also contain things like historical inequities or stereotypes or blind spots. So bias can also appear through the way that we frame a prompt or the context that we leave out of a prompt. So a response might favor a most common perspective, or it could treat one group's of experiences as the default, or omit people without signaling that there's anything wrong or that there's anything missing. So we can bring this back by thinking of a GPS as a useful comparison. So global positioning satellite, you know, how we get around Apple Maps, Google Maps every day. It can suggest a route quickly and adapt when conditions change. But if it directs you towards a road that was recently closed, you don't have to keep driving because the voice sounded confident in telling you continue on this road for the next 2 miles. So when you look at the environment, check another source, and make a human decision about what the right next step is. AI deserves the same combination of usefulness and skepticism. We shouldn't just take it at its word. So I tend to treat AI output as the way that I would treat the first draft from a very intelligent assistant who works quickly but doesn't know my organization or my audience or all the consequences of being wrong. I just give it context. I then look at what it generated and I inspect the results. And then I ask, what assumptions did it make? And then I check important facts against reliable sources. And then I also ask whose perspective is centered and whose might be missing. So, and whether a stereotype is shaping the answer. And then I revise the final. So you can ask an AI all that information. If you're using a generative AI like ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, you can ask it that information. What could it be missing? What might be a better way to put that? And it will give you its best answer. So that approach preserves the value without surrendering your judgment. Use it as a draft. Use AI for speed and for the range. Keep accountability with the human. Keep your humanity. Don't give it away to the AI. So where do you think we should actually use it? Let's start off with the job that we're trying to do here and not just the tools. So let me see if I can move forward here. When people ask me what AI tool they should learn, I usually ask what they're trying to do. Starting with a product tends to encourage us to force that product into every single problem. Starting with the task gives us a better chance of finding something that's genuinely useful. So what is it you're trying to do? So I'll look at 4 different kinds of friction here. First of all, creating. You're getting from a blank page to a workable first draft. Second, understanding. Getting oriented to something dense, something familiar, something that's scattered. And then third, organizing, which is turning conversations into notes or decisions, owners and next steps. And then finally, learning and deciding. You're then testing an idea. You're seeing alternatives. You're having a concept explained at the right level. So these categories tend to work across different professions. A teacher might create an activity, but a manager may turn meeting notes into a follow-up plan. A small business owner, such as myself, may compare service options. A parent may build a realistic weekly schedule. The content changes, but the cognitive work is still similar. So if you, whenever you're looking at these 4 categories, make a quick mental inventory of your own work week, your own week. What does your week look like? Where did you lose time because you just couldn't get started on something? Where did information arrive faster than you could process it? Where did a good conversation fail to become a clear next step? And that tends to be your short list of your possible experiments with AI. So as we walk through examples, notice that I'm not beginning with a clever prompt. I typically begin with a moment where a person is stuck on something, or is overloaded with a task, or is spending time on a step that's really of little value to them. And that's usually where AI starts earning its place. So imagine you need to send an email that's difficult. You know the facts, but you know the tone of the email matters. If you begin with something like, write an email, the result will probably sound generic because the request that you presented is generic. Instead, I might turn this around and say something like, I need to tell a colleague that a deadline has moved by 1 week. Then you continue to say, they have already done significant work. I want to be direct, acknowledge the inconvenience, explain the reason why briefly, and then end with 2 clear next steps. Keep it warm and under 180 words. Now, the system has a goal. It has the context and the constraints for the message and a standard for success. And then the output is still a draft. So whenever it creates that email, that's still a draft. You don't hit send right at that moment. I tend to read it aloud. I remove any language that I personally would never use in an email because it can tend to inflate words. And then I add the detail that typically I only know, things that I've not told an AI or that I've not given it in context, and make sure that the message is honest. So reading it aloud is one of my simplest quality checks. AI tends to have a recognizable tendency towards smooth and formal and inflated language. Your ear is going to catch phrases that your eyes may accept. So keep that in mind whenever you're using AI to write something. If you would never say the sentence to a person, revise it before you send it, because people will be able to see right through that. Chris would never say something like that. This has got to be AI generated. So this is a pretty good example of AI reducing startup costs, because I'm not outsourcing the relationship to an AI. I am using the tool to create something that I can react to. Editing a visible draft is often easier than composing from nothing, starting with a blank page. So the same pattern tends to work for agendas, or you could think of a proposal outline, or interview questions, a social media post, or a family travel plan. I love using AI to plan family vacations. We did that with a ski trip back in February. Give the tool your raw materials and what their boundaries are, and let it help you build that first version. Then make that version yours through reading it out loud and writing what may work for you and what doesn't. So suppose somebody sends you a long report an hour before your meeting, and I'm sure that all of us have been through that before. I know I certainly have. A weak request that you can ask an AI is summarize this. 2 words, that's it. A stronger request tends to explain what you need from the document. So you might ask for a central claim or the evidence supporting that claim, and then 3 decisions that could affect your team. And then you might also ask for things like open questions that you could ask, and the pages that you should read more closely. So you could also ask the system to separate what the document explicitly says from what it's inferring in the document. So the distinction matters in this case because a summary should help you get into the material. It shouldn't pretend that you've mastered that material because you've just been presented the document. You're not going to have time to read the whole document. You're summarizing it. So if a decision tends to carry financial or legal, clinical, academic, or reputational consequences, read the relevant source sections yourself. Don't hand that off to AI. So I also ask follow-up questions and that I think tend to expose the structure of the document. Like, what evidence in the document is the strongest? What evidence is missing? Which conclusions depends on an assumption? Are there terms that the author uses differently from common practice? So those questions tend to turn the summarization into an analysis. So you take it further. I tend to use AI here as an orientation layer. It helps me build a map before I walk into the territory. Once I see a structure, I can spend my attention where it matters rather than treating every single paragraph in that document as equally important. So I think this is useful for policies, for contracts, research articles, technical documentation, even a long email thread, as long as it's de-identified, depending on the tools that you're using. The value here is not really just getting short text and trying to find a shortcut to the end. I think it's giving you the ability to ask a clearer question, like, what do I need to understand? What do I need to verify? What do I need to discuss? And most importantly, what do I need to decide? So those are some things that can come out of the interaction with AI and how it can combine that dense information into ways that would help. So a lot of meetings don't fall away because nobody has a useful idea. They tend to fail because you have a handoff from the conversation to the action. People leave with different interpretations and ownership, and really no shared record of what changed in that meeting. But with approved transcript or even your own notes, an AI can help identify decisions and action items, owners' deadlines, unresolved questions, next steps, and points that need confirmation. It can also draft concise follow-up emails or as drafts, or create a first version of the agenda for the next meeting. So we tend to use that with Zoom and its ability to create summaries off of meetings. So if your system has the ability and has been approved to record meetings, you can get that output pretty straight away. So the review step here, though, is really important because a transcript can be wrong. It could mishear what was said in the meeting. A model can assign the wrong owner to a piece of text if it's able to identify people by their voices, or it can turn on a suggestion. It can turn a suggestion into a decision, and even though it's just a recommendation. I compare the output with my notes and then what I remember from the conversations and correct it before I share it out. So remember, AI is generating a draft. There's also leadership benefit to this because a clear follow-up makes work more visible and more fair. People can see what was decided and what remains open for decision making and who owns the next move, who's responsible. Was your name mentioned in the meeting? Are there any tasks that you have to take away? That tends to reduce the burden on the person who usually remembers everything in the meeting, and instead of everyone else being involved. So you're not relying on just one person to take complete notes on everything. So when this works, the meetings tend to become part of a system rather than just an isolated hour of your time. And the conversation tends to produce a record. The record produces action, and the action then feeds the next conversation. It keeps the process going. So for a lot of people, this is one of the highest value, but one of the least glamorous usages of AI. It saves time, but it also reduces organizational forgetting because we always miss some detail in a meeting because of us taking notes. So just make sure you have permission to record or process the conversation, and that you're using an approved environment or an approved tool that may record some sensitive information. And we certainly have to keep that in mind at UAB. So one of my favorite tools is personalized explanation. Traditional resources have one level or just like a single sequence. An AI conversation can adjust to different people. If you say, and you can do this with an AI, explain this as if I'm new to a topic, but don't oversimplify the topic. And then you ask for an analogy. You can ask for an example that's substantiated. You can ask for a counterexample to that topic. You can ask for 3 questions that test whether you actually understand it, so the AI can quiz you on it. You can also tell it to wait for your answer before it reveals the solutions. So this matters, especially when you're learning statistics, or like I'm doing linear algebra, or you're preparing for a certification, or entering a new industry, or trying to understand what your teenager is studying. Because I know, being a homeschool parent to my 14-year-old, I have to go back and relearn some of the stuff that I've forgotten. The new math is a big one with my 10-year-old. So I tend to use AI to brush me up on what they're teaching now with modern education in the Common Core. So, and you keep working with to connect those ideas together. The technology tends to not judge how long the gap has been between now and when you first learned the content. So AI is non-judgmental in that way. But the danger here tends to be passive agreement. If you only ask AI to confirm your idea, it'll often become very accommodating. We've heard stories in the news about how AI can be sycophantic, how it can agree with everything that you say, how it can tell you that you're a genius, you're more intelligent than 0.01 people on Earth, and it can feed that. And people tend to buy into what an AI tells them. So remember that you have to ask it to challenge you. You have to say something like, what am I assuming here? What would a skeptical expert say? What evidence would change this conclusion? Where's the weakest part of my reasoning? I have an instruction in one of my AIs that says, every time you give me an answer at the bottom, tell me why you might be wrong. And then it gives me a counterpoint on what it just gave me. So that's a standing instruction that I've given to my AI. So every time ChatGPT gives me something, it gives me a section that says, why might I be wrong, or where I could be incorrect on this. And then it tells me why. If it's used this way, then AI becomes less like an answering machine or a yes person, and more like a practice partner for you. It can't replace a qualified teacher. It can't replace professionals. It can't replace that expertise when it matters. So, but it can make the time between those human interactions a lot more productive. Just, again, keep your humanity about you. Don't let the AI tell you that you're a genius, tell you that you're the best thing since sliced bread, when you know that it's just blowing smoke. So this is a place where this was something interesting that I did here recently, where my own workflow started to change. There's an application called Obsidian. And I'm not suggesting you go out and download Obsidian that it's going to change your life today. But I used Claude, and initially it was the Claude Cowork application, along with Obsidian, because Obsidian uses files on a desktop to be able to record everything that I do and then have everything sitting there as files on my desktop so that I don't have to load everything in my brain. I can offload it to a file and notes, and it automatically keeps my notes for me. So you can think of Obsidian as a more of a flexible digital notebook, sort of like OneNote or Notion or the other notebooks that you might use on your machines. And it's where we tend to record our ideas and projects and meeting notes and things like that, and they can link to each other. So I've been connecting that note system to Claude, but my overall goal was to not create some science fiction memory, because I know that no system is perfect. But overall, it was a little more ordinary, and it was to make sure that I captured an idea once and connected it to the right projects and connecting it to other ways that I could use that in the next 6 months in new notes that I take. So Obsidian can surface things that I've seen in the past and tell me with 90% accuracy that what I'm talking about now relates to something that I saw in the past that my brain may have forgotten. So that's what the combination of Obsidian and Claude can do for a second brain. So if I finish a meeting, I can turn the notes into a summary and preserve those decisions. And if I'm developing a presentation, I can locate earlier ideas and related sources to use in that presentation. If I have a useful insight in one project, I can connect that to another project instead of rediscovering it 6 months later. So it's all right there for immediate recall. But it's a pretty familiar problem that I'm trying to solve here, and that's that we tend to capture more information than we can remember. I can search through Obsidian when I know the right word to search for, but a connected knowledge system like with Obsidian can also help whenever we remember only the idea or the project or the person associated with it. If we remember just a fraction of what we know, so of what we can remember. So the important lesson here is broader than these particular products, that AI tends to become more useful when it works with a trusted body of information that we can control. So our notes, our files, the prior decisions that we made can provide that context that just a blank chat window doesn't have. And remember, the memory that's inside of Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT or the others doesn't necessarily remember everything. So you may start losing some memory as conversations get longer and longer. It tends to forget what's at the beginning of a conversation. So you don't have to build my system, but just a folder with well-named documents, likely the organization system that you have today, and a consistent note-taking habit might just be enough for what you're doing. But the principle here is to make your knowledge retrievable. And that's where I can couple my note-taking system with an AI like Claude and be able to remember things more readily. So let's see here. We talked about choosing the tool after you choose the job. So with the AI market changing as quickly as it does, it changes too quickly for a permanent leaderboard. So a tool that leads one category this month may be caught up by another one next month, because the tools change all the time. And I tend to pay attention to those differences. And what I want you to do is think in categories. General purpose assistants like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini are good places for drafting and analysis. Workplace tools like Microsoft Copilot are useful when they are approved and connected to documents and emails like Outlook, and meetings where your work already lives. And then we have knowledge tools that are designed to work more closely with selected sources or personal notes, like notebooks and retrieval systems like Obsidian that I just mentioned. And then specialized tools tend to focus on narrower jobs like design, transcription, coding, or research discovery. So a lot of the frontier models like ChatGPT and Claude have their own coding assistants now built in. So just this morning, I built a small tool that works on my desktop, and you can't see it in the background here, but it changes my wallpaper every 30 minutes based on a search topic like coffee. I type in coffee and it retrieves new pictures every 30 minutes and keeps my desktop fresh. So that's just something fun that you can build using an AI. And it took me maybe 15 minutes to build that. So for a lot of people, a better strategy here is to learn one general assistant well, like depending on what tool you can use, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and use the AI capabilities that are already available in your workplace, like Microsoft Copilot, and then add a specialized tool when you have a recurring need that becomes clear. If you're doing a lot of design or a lot of research or a lot of coding, consider what specialized tools you could possibly use. And remember that convenience can hide a risk. So a tool being easy doesn't, to understand, to access, doesn't mean that it's appropriate for confidential or protected or proprietary or student information. Just keep that in mind whenever you're adding any sensitive or restricted information. If you aren't sure, don't do it at all, because you don't know where the data is being stored or who has eyes on it. So as we move into prompting, prompting doesn't require magic words, but you can think about how you would brief a capable colleague and how who had not necessarily been in the room whenever you're developing your ideas. But I tend to use 4 elements whenever we get into prompting and how do you get the best out of prompts. First of all, there's a goal. What are you trying to produce, or what are you trying to decide? And then context. What does the system need to understand about the audience or the situation or the source material behind the goal? And then next, we have any constraints. What should it include? What should it avoid? What should it protect or keep within it? And then lastly, we have criteria. What are some of the criteria that would make the result more useful? So you can use those 4 elements to get the most out of your prompting. So here's an idea, and you can actually type in goal. Help me prepare a 30-minute conversation with a new supervisor. Context. I want to discuss priorities, expectations, how progress will be measured. Constraints. Keep the agenda to 5 questions and avoid any corporate jargon. So those are your constraints. And the criteria, the question should invite specific answers and reveal where expectations may be unclear. So you can use that framework to help develop a prompt to use in your AI. Goal, context, constraints, and criteria. The skill here is not necessarily writing a perfect prompt in the first attempt, but the skill is directing an iterative conversation with the AI. Clear thinking tends to produce clear context in this case, and clear context usually gives you better output from the AI. So don't be afraid to iterate over a conversation. So let's talk a little bit about trust and how there's a loop whenever we're talking about trust. So I tend to use 4 verbs whenever we are dealing with trust in an AI: verify, protect, disclose, and decide. First of all, verify important claims. Follow citations to the actual source. If it gives you a DOI link, click on that DOI link. Make sure that the title matches the title that an AI gave you. Make sure you check dates and numbers and names and quotations. Ask whether the answer is based on evidence or just some plausible language. Because if you don't verify, some inaccurate information is going to get loose in your work. Has anybody seen the Canadian lawmaker recently that read a ChatGPT script and actually read some of the examples or some of the prompting that the AI was asking him? If you've not, go out and look for that Canadian lawmaker. It's kind of funny, but it's unfortunate that wasn't pre-read and verified before. So, but for hallucinations, we have to get back to hallucinations here, because for hallucinations, they make sure you trace any consequential claims to authoritative original sources. Don't just trust that the AI knows what it's talking about, because if it's something that's controversial, make sure you verify it. For bias, make sure you ask a different set of questions. Make sure you ask things like who's represented, who may be missing or disadvantaged. Does the response rely on a stereotype or assume a single experience is universal? Because chances are there's bias at play. Next, we move into protect. Protect sensitive information. Don't paste confidential, protected, restricted, proprietary, student, patient, employee, or personally identifying information into a tool unless your organization said it's okay. UAB has guiding principles around this that emphasize privacy and security and transparency whenever AI is at work here. Then we disclose. Disclose AI usage when the audience, policy, or context reasonably expects that transparency. So transparency doesn't require narrating every spelling suggestion. It means just being honest when AI materially shapes an analysis or decisions or representations. And then lastly, decide. Decide as a human. AI can surface options and recommendations, but it shouldn't become a shield from accountability. So make sure that you review all the output before you use it or before you share it. Because if you get into a position where an AI has created something and you get stuck in that position, what are you going to do? You have to be really good at thinking on your feet, and over-reliance on AI tends to erode that capability. So there is a little bit of tension in this because too little caution creates preventable harm, but too much caution keeps useful tools away from people who can benefit. So make sure that you practice responsible usage, and that responsible usage tends to sit in between those two extremes of caution. So manage the risks. And this might sound cautious, but caution is what makes sustained use possible. Trust doesn't come from just pretending that the tool is flawless, because it's not. AI is not infallible. Trust comes from repeating a process for catching its weaknesses and keeping the person responsible. So let's make sure that we, again, maintain our humanity with these tool sets. So if I could leave you with one thing here, try and transform. I don't want you to try and transform your entire workflow, because you're just going to create more work. But let's just start with a single task here. Look for something repeated. Look for something that's time consuming. Look for something that's low risk. Maybe it's like turning your rough notes into an agenda, or rewriting a message for more clarity or for a different reading level, or generating questions before a meeting, or preparing you for a meeting with the information that you need to know, comparing two public documents to one another, building a study quiz. You could certainly do that, and then define what a good result looks like. Run the task with and without an AI and compare the results. See if the results was similar to your normal process, and measure something simple. Measure the time that you've saved, whether the quality was improved, whether there's fewer steps in the process. So think about that whenever you're using AI in your workflow. So again, start simple. And don't begin with the highest stakes task that you've got in your life here. Start small. Don't start with something that's very consequential or very important for the outcome to be perfect the first time. So then again, make sure you verify and compare with what you normally do. Compare the AI with the outcome. I developed a Python script. Python's a programming language that processes a series of student reports or student assignments that converts the student assignments from Word, PowerPoint, Excel into a combined PDF, and then renames them. That was a repeated process that required us to hire a temporary employee a couple of times a year to do the work. But using that Python script running on my local UAV machine that ensured privacy of that student information allowed us to run what normally took weeks or months in just a few minutes. So start with a question. AI literacy tends to grow through those small cycles. Use it, inspect the results, adjust it, and repeat it, because that feedback is what's going to happen, or what's going to matter in your usage of it. So your first step doesn't need to be impressive. Don't overstep your bounds here, but just try something small. Try something easy. And I don't think the most interesting question here is whether AI can produce more words or create slides or more messages, because we've already seen plenty of that. We know that it can do all that. The better question is, what can we do with the attention that we recover from the usage of these tools? Can we spend more time understanding a student, working with a patient, serving a client, mentoring a colleague? It frees us up for that time. So AI tends to reduce the friction, give it the context, verify what matters in the work, in the output, protect the people and the information, keep the judgment and accountability with the human, not with the AI. So again, you don't need to master every tool. I've not mastered every tool, and I've been dealing with this for decades now. As it relates to software development, data analytics, predictive analytics, machine learning, Python scripting, and all that. I've not learned everything myself. So you just need enough literacy to make thoughtful choices and enough curiosity to keep learning. Ask questions, reach out. I'm a big believer in community. Reach out to me if you don't know where to start. I'm in the UAB system. You're welcome to reach out to me at any time. If you don't reach out to me or you don't want to talk to other folks, start with one useful task today and build from the evidence rather than the hype that you're hearing out in the media right now. You probably heard this week that an AI has broken into Hugging Face, and now they're saying that it's called Skynet Day. They're coining it a Skynet Day, which couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, there's smart models out there. Are we looking at a Terminator type of future? Not really. No, not if you do your research and you critically think your way through this and you understand what's going on behind the scenes, it becomes a lot less scary, because all it really is behind the scenes is statistics, probability, and mathematics. So thank you for giving me the time to speak to you today. I know there's some polls that we've got here. I'd love to hear what you have to say, what concerns you, and what are some of the greatest opportunities for AI in your life. So Greg, with that, I'll turn it back over to you. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. This is great information and a great broad overview of AI and what it can do to help. If you do have questions, go ahead, drop them in chat. We do have a few minutes with Chris that we can get those answered. So I got to ask, and this is one that you probably you feel quite often, and it kind of goes off of the Terminator a little bit. So how do you see AI changing life as we know it over the next 5-10 years?
Well, so you can go in two different directions. You can go in the dark direction, or you can go in the light direction. I tend to go in the light direction, and how AI is going to help society and help humanity, how it's going to help with our work and not take over. We hear terms like artificial general intelligence and how it's going to become, within the next 4 years, more intelligent than any expert human on the planet. Yes, that is possible, because AI is trained on everything on the internet, but you got to think about everything that's on the internet. So it doesn't have our knowledge, our experience, our humanity. So it doesn't learn from that. I think in the short term, it's going to help us do our work more efficiently. It's going to do exactly what it is we need it to do. It's going to help us with these repetitive tasks. Is it coming for jobs? Yes, in certain places like software development. People that do repetitive work, but in places that matter, people that need doctors, nurses, even lawyers to a certain extent are at risk of losing their jobs, but doctors and nurses that actually have hands-on with patients and demonstrate empathy, they're going to be safe for a long time coming. But as we make more advances with software, AI, and predictive work, and then robotics, and start combining the two, I can't help but think it's going to be a benefit for humanity. And that's as long as we have good guardrails in place and ethics about us as we guide ourselves into the future with these technologies.
Now, I don't want you to delve too much into this topic. I know it's one of your expertise, but we have a webinar in August with Dr. Ford around how AI is impacting patient care and all that. So, but briefly, can you explain details on the use of AI in the creation of patient medical records by healthcare providers and how it's impacting healthcare?
Well, so, and I teach at the School of Nursing on this, and all of the main EHRs are integrating AI into their tools, but they're using AI to help summarize patient charts. They are, and we're using AI to help analyze hundreds, thousands, millions of patient records to help serve other patients. So imagine hospital-acquired pressure injuries, falls, which patients that we have that are at risk of falls with a specific percentage of accuracy. That's where we're seeing AI come in to help. Documentation is a big one for all clinicians because they spend a lot of time documenting their information. What happens if an AI can listen to an interaction with a patient and be able to summarize that and write that to the chart, and then have the clinician access that AI generated text and validate it as true. So that's where I see a lot of the help coming.
It's one of those things, it's a tool in the tool belt, accept it, it's here, we almost have to use it, but it's all about how we use it and the process we take in going down that journey.
It's another tool in our what we call our data-driven decision tool belt. It's all extra data. How do we make our decisions? Yeah. And AI can give you a possible diagnosis, but as a clinician with experience, are you actually going to go with what the AI says? What happens if you have a physician that wants, if you're a nurse, you have a physician that goes with what an AI says, but then your knowledge and experience says that that's wrong? Do you have the ability to speak up and say, well, what the physician is doing is agreeing with an AI that's not safe for the patient? We have to have that agency and the ability to speak back. I mean, we're still human. We're still in charge.
Chris, thank you so much. Great information, like I mentioned before. It's great to have you here with us today.
And if there's other chats or other questions that you've got, I'm happy to answer those offline.
Fantastic. And just a quick note for today's audience, this webinar was recorded. Once it's online, we're going to send an email to you with the link so you can check it out after this, and you can check it out again and again or share with others. In a moment, we're going to highlight the follow-ups to this webinar series for AI. But first, you want to add a little adventure to your calendar. I know Chris is going on cruises left and right as he travel with fellow alumni to incredible destinations, including Ireland, Norway, French Riviera, and London. We'd love to have you join us as you experience the world through our travel program. Visit alumni.uab.edu/travel to learn more and explore upcoming trips. As for our next two webinars, they're part of our series exploring artificial intelligence. On August 13th, the second of the AI series is Good, Risky, or Unknown: The Ethics of Everyday AI. August 27th, we're going to wind down the series with Behind the Screens: What AI-Powered Care Means for Patients. Then on September 18th, come back for From Powders to Performance: What's Worth It and What's Not, as we looked at supplements and other things. And finally, October 21st, join us for the new weight loss medication, Success Surprises and What's Next. This expands on a previous webinar hosted a couple of years ago, and it's a not miss virtual event. As we wrap up, we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback helps us improve and shape future webinar topics. Just scan the QR code on your screen to access a brief survey and share your thoughts. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. And as always, go Blazers.